Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Springtime for Hitler, and I've got no rhythm. Today I think I'm going to review two books, front list new releases that have come out in the last couple of months. That I had Amazon delivered to me all the way from the States. I'm in my daughter's old bedroom right now. I've moved my desk in here to work. My mum sleeps here when she comes staying. She just went home last week, so I'm back in here, and I couldn't bother to move the laptop and everything around, so I'm going to glue from here and see how we go. Okay, two books. I said one fiction, one non-fiction. Let's give this a go. The first of these books is Audition by Katie Kitamura. Nice, slim fiction novel. What is this? Comes in just under 200 pages. My second Katie Kitamura book that I bought new in hardback. So this is full price. What does it say here? $28, cheap as creepers. I got free shipping to Israel because I had over $49 on the order, but I probably didn't pay far off that. But I got a voucher. Someone sent me a gift, so it's a lot of money to pay for a book. My first Katie Kitamura was Intimacies, which I picked up secondhand in a shop here in Israel. It cost me 15 shekel, which is like $4. So bit of a step up, but part of the reason for that was because of the great experience I had with Intimacies, which I loved. Really thought this was a 5-star read. Just great from every angle, great writing, an interesting notion of what intimacy is, which kind of continues in Audition. Talk about in a second. There's a sort of coldness and a distance to it, and so that juxtaposition of that style and yet the content and the goal of what is the book's exploring was kind of interesting to me. This is a book that was easy to lend, so I think I lent this to somebody who then said, "Oh, do you mind if I give it to somebody else?" And it's eventually come back to me. But I think a few people read this who, not including people I might not necessarily recommend it to, and all had great experience with it. Again, part because it's short, it's very accessible, but it's also super interesting. It's about a translator in The Hague, listening into a war crimes trial, and so that's this intimacy where you have the voice in your ear and you're hearing the words as they were actually spoken, but having to translate them into something else someone else can understand. There's a whole interplay going on there, which was fascinating, just really well told. So I loved Intimacies. So I picked up Audition because I'd heard good things, and as I had this voucher, I wanted to get something. And this was the other book the non-fiction book I'm going to read was really what I wanted, and this was kind of to make up the value. I would say, let's start with the end. Not as I didn't enjoy this quite as much in Intimacies, but it's fantastic. The writing is the writing is strong enough that I will pick up anything that Ms. Kitamura publishes. And there's an early novel which I will go back to and find at some point. And just because the precision and the elegance of the writing on a sentence by sentence level is just exquisite. Here we have something which is slightly less plot driven, I would guess, than Intimacies, even though the plot is not the main thing I remember. But here there's a novel of the mind going on, in that the first section of the book we're presented with a situation, and our narrator is an actress, and she's approached, or we see her having a kind of intimate meal with a young person who's who is somewhere in her orbit, and then she sees her husband and gets very self-conscious about being in a meal with this younger man, and how that plays out. And did the husband see her, or did he not see her? And there's some sort of intrigue going on. Then she goes back and she's rehearsing as the lead part in this play. So again, this sense of the intimacy is again breached, like it was with the translation. Here we have a performer, an actress, I'm supposed to say actor, I guess, who has someone else's lines to perform, and so the emotions are all assumed and then presented, and it's all for the benefit of others. And there's something, again, there's that barrier between reality and intimacy, or that porous a relationship between intimacy and artifice. That makes sense. I'm being arsey to farcy. Anyway, that's kind of interesting. That's the first part of the book. And the gentleman, the young man that she has dinner with, has a weird suggestion to her where I'm not going to spoil too much. I think it's very early on in the book where he says, "I think you're my mother." And there's a number of reasons why that can't be true and she things, and but they have to continue being in each other's orbit because he's now working for the director of the play that she's being directed during rehearsals. Okay, and we get to this point, and then about halfway through the book, suddenly there's a switch, and we start the next part of the book where the same characters and the same narrator, but now he is her son. So for the first part, and this is not a continuation of what we found out over time. This is a new reality, or slightly, turn the dial 1-2 degrees away from true north, and we're just looking at everything through a slightly different lens. And again, I'm sorry if that's a spoiler. Maybe I should put a thing. I'll put a thing on the on YouTube to say there may be spoilers here. But it's a short book, and that's not necessarily the point of it. The point is about how we relate to reality, who we are, what is the nature of acting to some degree, and artifice, and playing a role, and then playing a role in an actual play, but also playing a role in one's life, in one's relationships. Audition. I don't love the title as a representation of the book, but I kind of get it. But just super fascinating, quite intense, but short. And then the ending goes in unexpected places. But I think what's worth coming for above everything is the writing. There's something about her insights and her views of the way the human mind, any other mind, the way our minds work and how we process and what intimacies and the deceptions and the artifices that we use in order to get through life, and the intimacies. In many ways, intimacies would also be a great title for this, and how we allow intimacy into our lives and into the relationships we have with others. This is Audition by Katie Kitamura. I liked it very much. Not quite as much intimacies, but this is an author that I will be following and reading because A, she publishes relatively short books, but B, they are exquisite. Okay, on to non-fiction. This was a book that I read a review of in the New York Times. If I find it, maybe I'll put a link. Unusual for me to go from review to owning the book to reading the book so quickly. So I read this review maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. I ordered the book. It came within like 2 weeks from America, which is pretty good. Usually I wait 4 to 6 weeks for books to arrive if I'm ordering them from the States, which is not often. And this came relatively quickly, and I read it. I read Audition first, and then I read this book. And the book I'm talking about is called Eminent Jews by David Denby. Denby, you should know, is not such a Jewish name, but David Denby turns out is a Jew, and he's writing about 4 other eminent Jews. David Denby is a long-term writer for The New Yorker, a man, I would say, in his 70s now, maybe turning 80. And the reason I place that is to put him in context with the 4 people he's writing about. And the 4 people he's writing about, it says here, Bernstein, Brooks, Frieden, and Mailer. The actual order in this, I believe, is Brooks, Frieden, Mailer, and then Bernstein at the end. Mel, Betty, Norman, and of course Leonard Bernstein. I keep trying to say Bernstein, and I'm correcting myself because I know that he pronounced it Bernstein. This is a fascinating, terrific, accessible read about 4 American Jews in the 20th century. And I'm placing them in that context, in the 20th century. David Denby, a Jew from the 20th century, and American being the thing. It says Eminent Jews. This is about Jewish Americans, or American Jews, and the impact of American Jews on American culture in the 20th century. And some of these are more or less familiar to me. So Mel Brooks, I'm familiar with his films, and we grew up with Mel Brooks seasons on TV in England. The Producers was never one of my favorites, but Blazing Saddles was obviously a key text for us in the days when things would be recorded off the television and watched with groups of friends. I remember very specifically one afternoon, maybe 25 people of different ages, all of us gathering in someone's house, and this video going in the VHS, and we played and we played sounds. I remember there was a guy there, a couple of years older than me, was handsome, a lot of the girls liked him, but he was not known for his smarts. And I remember as the title came up, he read it out, Blazing Saddles, and that was always stayed in my head. I'm sure he's a fine grown-up man now. I was about 13, 14 at the time, jealous of him being 16. Anyway, so Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles, a key text for us. History of the World Part 1 came out when I was right at that age, and then we went back over the whole catalogue. I remember there was let's say a movie season probably on BBC Two where they showed silent movie Young Frankenstein, Stein. Again, not my favourite, but everything, I understood that this was a funny guy, and I've since gone back and sort of looked at his career, and he had this resurgence when the producers came back came to Broadway in the 25 years ago, whenever it was, with Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick. So he's an interesting guy, Mel Brooks. All of these characters, their journey through the 20th century had its ups and downs, and they came in and out of fashion, and that's kind of interesting to me. But what Denby is producing here, we have mini biographies of each of them, so each one gets less than 100 pages dedicated to them, because the whole book is under 400 with an index at the back. So we get mini biographies of each, taking us through their careers, but also showing us times where they weren't necessarily at the peak of their popularity. They went in and out of fashion, but something along the path that they were on, it was somehow relevant and somehow important to culture, and the impact they have had remains valuable. And in some ways, I think he quotes someone else saying that, I counterintuitively, and that may be putting it mildly, called the 20th century in America the Jewish century, or the 20th century throughout the world, the Jewish century. That's why counterintuitive. May not have been the best time for the Jews, somewhere slap bang in the middle of the 20th century, but certainly in America, the preeminence of these characters and the way they rose in their fields and impacted society was super interesting and worthy of note. And each of these four is a launch pad to talking about Jewishness and Jewish Americanness. And I'm originally a British Jew, now I'm an Israeli Jew. So American Jews as a group that I'm familiar with, but I haven't had the same experiences that these people had, whether they were quotas, whether they were Jews surrounded by sort of waspy, slightly anti-Jewish sentiment, whether, certainly not rising to the heights of any degree. I don't know the talent that these people have, and how they use that and leverage that, and what drew them. Also, I don't necessarily think I have the same background in terms of these the children of immigrants or struggling lower to middle class, breaking out and becoming something in the wider world. I don't, these are not necessarily experiences I share, but something I can appreciate. I know a lot of American Jews, and I'd be happy lending this book to all of them. So we go from Brooks to Betty Friedan, a character that I was not familiar with, a woman that I was not familiar with, but really early on at the heart of that wave of feminism that said women don't just have to be at home and look after the kids, that you can have agency, that you should have agency, you should get a job, you should have a life. And became a controversial figure because there were things that she didn't like, and she quite liked being married, and she seems, based on the text I'm reading here, not to have been a big fan of lesbians, but an interesting character nevertheless. Norm Mailer I know a little bit more about, just because I've read some of his books. I've got a bunch here. Norm Mailer, white American novelist, now completely out of fashion. Naked and the Dead, which I believe was an astonishing debut when it came out in 1948, one of the first books written about what it was like to be a soldier in World War II. That's just an astonishing debut for a young writer. And then the other key text of his, of course, the Executioner Song, after he slagged off Truman Capote for writing In Cold Blood. He sort of writes 2.5 In Cold Bloods in one book. This is sort of non-fiction novel about Gary Gilmore, a man who, within 9 months of being released from prison, killed somebody. I believe that's the. I don't. So long since I read this. I read this almost 30 years ago. Yeah, yes, September '95. I purchased this for £1.50 at my local bookshop in England. So I figured. I think this was after I did In Cold Blood. This was on the if you like that, you will like this list. And this is just its own thing. It's whatever 1,400 pages worth. No, so not that much. 1,000 pages. 1,050. And it follows Gary Gilmore after he's committed this crime, after he's been arrested, sentenced to execution, and his determination to allow that execution to go forward, while the liberal world is pulling its hair out, saying, no, you must appeal, executions are bad. And Gary Gilmore believed that he had done wrong, and this was the only possible outcome. Just a really sort of groundbreaking, if that's not a too overused a term, book. The Executioners on my non-mailer. I read other couple. I read Tough Guys Don't Dance. I read Harlot's Ghost, which is another massive book. This is 1,400 pages, and it's about the CIA and about sort of waspy Americans and their relationship to espionage, and Denby's actually quite dismissive of those later works, but has good things to say about Norm Mailer, who had his own complex life, was married several times. He stabbed one of his wives. She survived, and then he's blind drunk and not making excuses, and was devastated by what he'd done for it seems like the rest of his life. He has children with his first. He marries 4 or 5 more times after that, but his capacity for violence scared him, and had a huge impact on his life going forwards. He later, after becoming hugely successful as a novelist, he then, as falls out of fashion, has this terrible fall from grace, based on his own violence, and then becomes an astonishingly successful sports writer. And he wrote about The Rumble in the Jungle, I believe, and one of the foremost pieces of sports writing, and was obsessed with boxers and boxing, and had a sort of resurgence before he fell out of fashion again, long before not long before, but before he died. And now I don't believe anyone reads him. And I don't think I'm going to pick up any more Mailer, except based on this. I probably would like to read a collection of that sports writing. And then we finish with Leonard Bernstein, who the one that the character in this book that people probably know most about, and I didn't know a whole lot about. I'm a big fan, going back, of On the Town, which is one of my favourite musicals. West Side Story, of course. I think instead of doing Springtime for Hitler, I was supposed to do New York, New York, it's a wonderful town. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. The people travel in a hole in the ground. New York, New York. So I love On the Town. I loved reading about him and his life and his relationship with his parents. Again, there's a sort of earthy sexuality running through all 4 of these characters, which is, I don't want to claim that as being something to do with being an eminent Jew, but it's there, and it's one of the running themes. Bernstein had a complex life, in that he was devoted to his wife, but with no great fidelity, and his appetites were vast and varied. Am I being too coy about the whole thing? If you know Leonard Bernstein, you know Leonard Bernstein, but his talent, undeniable. And what we get here, some stuff that I didn't know about, was his talent as a teacher, as an explainer of music. So he's a conductor, he's a composer. We know that, but his love of music and his love of sharing, his teaching, and something that comes, in all of these, there's something of that sort of element of parenting, and none of these people seem to be role models of any kind, let alone parenting. But there is something, that nurturing, that teach your children, that sense that that does seem to be something about American Jews. There was I think it's quoted in here. There's some stat that even early in going back to the 18th and 19th century, the literacy rates in Jewish families were higher than comparably people in the same level socially, because there was that constant, that Jewish families taught their children to read because you needed to read in order to be able to pray, study, whatever was fundamental parts of that Jewish family and that Jewish community at the time. And something about that carries on and is as real for Bernstein as it is for the rest of them, but I think is emphasized there that this was a person who was driven to share and explain, and the joy of passing it on. And that's something about the conductor, I guess, in marshalling all these forces in front of him in order to achieve a goal of excellence. 1 second. Yeah, I've got no idea what it was. My brother calling me, asking me if I want to go to the cinema soon. I'm completely lost. I was probably waffling on about Leonard Bernstein, Stein. Anyway, Eminent Jews, David Denby. I think, certainly will be of interest to all American Jews that I know, but I think has real interest and value for anyone interested in 20th century American culture, and any of these particular characters. I say, they're good mini biographies. I don't think they're hagiographies, Bernstein. I don't think they portraying them, any of them as saints, but I think there's value, and there is what ties us in. There is a through line that goes through this book. There is a hypothesis there about eminent Jews in the 20th century, and their contribution to certainly American culture, maybe even global culture. I think perhaps another 20th century eminent Jew may have said, attention must be paid. That's Eminent Jews by David Denby, and I also spoke about, I don't want to put it now, somewhere back there. Back there. Oh, screen. Audition by Kitamura. Thanks very much. God bless. Bye.